Oh shoot, that's because I'm at the end of the presentation. Okay, hang on. Let me get back to, get back to the first slide. Okay, there we go. This is me again. Hello. Um, woohoo, okay, it worked. All right, so how not to go crazy when you're getting a divorce. It's not the easiest thing, but it can definitely be done. You know, some of the things that we go through, we experience, we feel like a whole range of emotions, but some of the most common ones are grief, regret, doubt, guilt, some relief. Anger is certainly up there. I should have probably added it to the screen, but I think it's probably, you know, one of the most common ones that you all recognize. So I'm going to go through kind of some of the different feelings and emotions, things that we go through, and then kind of how to deal with them as we go through this. So for grief, it's a lot of different things fall under grief. I mean, oftentimes we think of grief as just related to a death. But if you think about loss, I mean, it's all like a little bit of a death. I mean, it's the death of your marriage, certainly. So we're going to use grief and loss kind of interchangeably as we talk about this. But, you know, the first thing people feel a loss of is the loss of the marriage. And that is a big thing in and of itself. But there are so many more things that we lose and we grieve during this process that it's just important to recognize, I think, the entirety, kind of the whole picture, and see all the different things that are maybe impacting you, and kind of recognizing that you're going through something really profound and transformative, either hopefully in a good way or maybe not in such a good way, or a little bit of both. And just to be able to acknowledge, I guess, the magnitude of it. So one of the things that you also lose is sort of the ideal future. You know, nobody goes into a marriage thinking like, I'll try this and hope it works. Well, maybe some people do, most people don't. You know, so they have this idea of like what the future is going to look like. We're going to be married, we're going to have kids, or we're not going to have kids, or we're going to travel, or we're going to build our dream home, or we're going to be us against the world kind of thing. And whatever that picture looked like for you is now changing. You know, it's definitely going to look different, and there's definitely a loss of what that picture looked like for you. So I think it's important to recognize for yourself that it's not just what you're going through in the moment, but also kind of this idea of what your future, what you thought your future was going to look like is now really different. And so kind of letting go of what you thought it was going to be and trying to figure out how you want the future to look going forwards and how you can shape that. There's also a loss of family and friends. I mean, most people, when they go through a divorce, also lose to some degree contact with their in-laws. So maybe that's a good thing, or maybe it's a real loss for you. So just recognize that, you know, your relationship with your in-laws will change, whether it's parents-in-law, mother-in-law, father-in-law, or sister-in-law, but also friends. And, you know, it's really a shame, but very often friends either feel uncomfortable, like in the middle of a divorce, and kind of either return to like whoever they were friends with originally, if it was, you know, your husband's friend or your wife's friend. They often kind of sort of take sides without, even if they don't mean to take sides, they're just more comfortable that way. Some people do absolutely take sides in a divorce. Some people, unfortunately, and I hope that this changes over time, but I think this is still sort of a little bit leftover of like, it's a little contagious divorce. Like, I don't want that. And I don't want that to be around me or my family or my kids or whatever. And so people sometimes, unfortunately, still kind of pull back when someone they know is going through a divorce, like as if it's contagious. There's also the loss of the identity that you're going through. Like, who are you? Like, I was a wife, I was a mom, probably you still are if you were. But maybe your kids aren't living with you full time. So I was a full time stay at home mom, or it was a, you know, full-time dad and now I'm going to be a 50% dad or a weekend dad, or I was a daughter-in-law, I was a sister-in-law, I was a brother-in-law. Like there's a lot of who you are connected to all the roles you play in your life. So if one of the roles changes or goes away, then part of your identity changes as well. So, you know, if you had a great relationship with your in-laws, then hopefully that can continue. It may look a little different and you may have to kind of figure out boundaries and how to manage that and how to work that out. But, hopefully that can continue. If you didn't have a great relationship with your in-laws, then maybe that's okay with you and you're able to kind of cut ties, especially like in any kind of toxic relationships. It's a lot easier to cut ties if you're not really connected with them. But just to realize that it does change a little bit of who you are in your own self concept. And again, it's also on the flip side an opportunity to create who you want to be going forward. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. And another loss is instead of grief, really this is a loss, but there's often a financial loss, whether it's you're spending a ton of money on attorneys and they're fighting with each other, or whether you lost your spouse's income, or you had to sell the house, then there's some kind of loss. There's definitely some financial loss in some way connected to a divorce. So in terms of grief, these are just some of the things that people have to learn to cope with as they're going through a divorce. Now, in terms of regret, doubt, guilt, I kind of lump these together because I think we feel a lot of these in a lot of different situations. So, in terms of choices, sometimes we regret the choices that we made. Did we marry the wrong person? Probably, because you're getting a divorce. But we can sometimes clearly look back and go like, I don't know what I was thinking, or this was really just a mistake. And maybe even you knew it from the beginning. I mean, a lot of people I know like knew that this probably wasn't going to work, but they were really going to give it a try, or they felt like they were too far into it to back out of it by the time they got married. But like choices that we've made, or choices in the marriage that you've made, whether you chose to keep your finances together or keep your finances separately, and whatever consequence that has brought for you now during the divorce. So there's a lot of doubt, like, should I have done this? Shouldn't I have done this? Is this the right decision? Am I making the right choice? And certainly guilt. I mean, I don't know most people going through a divorce who don't feel some amount of guilt, whether it's about their children or just the idea that like, if only, if I had done this, maybe then that. I guess that falls a little bit more under regret, but there's very often guilt around that, or around relationships, or around behavior. Like, should I have worked on my anger differently so that I wouldn't have, lost it on my spouse and we wouldn't be fighting so much? Or should I have set boundaries in my relationship? And how do I learn to do that going forward so that I can set healthy boundaries going forward with other relationships that I have? Should I have been more honest and open? Or should, if there's like some secretive behavior, or, if there's infidelity in a relationship, should I have ended the relationship and then started seeing somebody? So there's very often regret and doubt and guilt tied to all aspects of the divorce. I want you guys to really hold in mind this idea of and. So we often feel relief when we're going through a divorce because we've been fighting for a long time, or we really was a really toxic relationship, or, God forbid somebody was really abusive, and we're just so relieved that this is going to be over. And we can have regrets, and we can feel loss, and we can have some doubt. So I think it's really important to hold in mind this idea of and. We have two different feelings at the same time very often. think about like a new job you're about to start. You're really excited for your new job, but you're also really scared. Am I going to be able to do it? Am I going to perform well? Think about, if you have children, like you were really excited to have a child, but also maybe terrified. Am I going to be a good parent? Am I going to know what to do? So those are big, major life things. But, very often we have two different feelings about things that are our everyday experiences. I'm, you know, now can't think of one, of course, but you know, I think that you all can relate to having two different feelings at the same time. And I really just want to encourage you to hold in mind this idea of and. I can be super angry at my ex and think he's like a low life, and I don't want my kids to have that idea of their father, so I'm not going to bad talk him in front of my kids. Like holding two different emotions at once, I think, is really important. So, with all of these feelings, how do we cope with them? And I know self care is like a buzzword that gets used all the time and maybe overused in certain ways, but I do think is really important when you're going through a divorce. I have to say, the airlines have the right idea. The airlines always tell you when the mask drops down, put your excuse me, put your own mask on first before you help somebody else. And as women, I think a lot of times we struggle with the idea that we're going to take care of ourselves before we take care of somebody else, like our children or our spouse when times were good, or parents or a friend or anybody. But yes, absolutely, you have to take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, there is going to be nothing left for you to take care of anybody else with. I kind of use this analogy sometimes with my clients of like a phone, your phone battery. Sometimes you can let your phone battery run down to like 10% and you're like, okay, I hope it just makes it through this call or whatever. And then all of a sudden it just dies. So like we're like that battery. Like you can go and go and go, but like when you're down to that last 10%, like you are no good to anybody. So you have to be able to recharge yourself. And so how do you do that? First of all, what brings you comfort? What brings joy? What sparks some passion in your life? Do you like to like hold up in a corner and like get into a book? Do you like to go for a run and really like cleanse your head? Do you like to clean your house? That doesn't really sound like self-care to me personally, but I had a roommate once who said that like when the house was clean, it was like the cobwebs in her mind were clean. Um, do you like to paint? Do you like to listen to music? Do you, like to be out in nature? What is it that brings you comfort? Can you take a bubble bath at night after your kids have gone to bed? Or can you turn off the phone and just not be reachable, assuming that your kids are like home and safe? If I keep saying your kids, and I know not everyone has kids, but I am just putting out there for those who are now going to be, either full-time or part-time single parents. Um, and then going back to basics, getting some exercise, eating healthy meals, getting a decent amount of sleep, those are all really important because you just can't function that way. I mean, think about when you're tired, or think about when your spouse was tired or your kids are tired. They get cranky. Like everyone gets cranky when they're tired. Or if you're hungry and you get hangry, like you're angry because you're just hungry and you need to eat. So it's really important to kind of keep the basics in mind and remember to eat, to sleep, and to get some exercise. Now, in terms of self-care that can be done like really quickly anywhere, I want to just say that deep breathing and some mindfulness um, exercises are really quick and healthy and very easy. So taking some deep breaths, and I really encourage, and maybe I'll do this with you guys right now, I really encourage you to try this as we're talking. So you breathe in through your nose and hold it for the count of 4. Then breathe in through your nose to the count of 4, then hold it to the count of 4, then exhale really slowly, like you're blowing through a straw, like to the count of 4. So let's try that together for a second. So I'll count as we do this. So, excuse me. So inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold it, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. And just notice, just, in the 10 seconds that it took to do that, like maybe you just feel a little bit calmer. And then having some mindfulness exercises. There are a million apps out there now, like Calm or Headspace, that all have mindfulness exercises that are really quick and easy to do. So I really encourage you guys to find something, whether it's gardening, like for me, it's photography. If I'm looking through a camera lens and really focused on getting the shot, like the rest of the world just goes away. That's all I'm focused on. So I really encourage you guys to try to find some mindfulness activities to do. Why is this not doing anything? Okay. All right. The other thing we really need in terms of coping with our feelings is support. And the first kind of support I want to talk about is emotional support. So turning to friends and family, like talking to a good friend or calling your mom or talking to your sister, your brother, someone who's able to listen, someone who is safe and that you trust. And then think about who's still in your village, and who are your friends, who are your supports. If you've had a loss in that village, who can I replace them with? Who can I add into my village? Am I gonna become more friendly with some of the moms on my kids' baseball team? Or can I now make time to make friends at work in a way that I didn't have when I was married? Like, who can you add to your village that is going to support you through this? And those are in terms of like your, what we call like natural supports, people that are just kind of in your life naturally. But also there's great supports out there in terms of joining a support group or finding a therapist. I think, like Karen said, I think everyone can use a therapist when they're going through this. And I'm not saying it's me, I'm not the best fit for the entire world, but finding a therapist that you have a good fit with, or finding a support group that you feel like is a good fit for you, I think is really helpful and really important. The other kind of support is practical support. If you're going to either be a single parent now or a part-time single parent, or you're doing things alone for the first time that you haven't had to do either in many years or maybe ever, are there friends and family that can help you with that? Like, can a friend or a family member like come watch your kids for an hour so that you can run to the grocery store like by yourself? Or if you're able to afford it, I would definitely say hire somebody. This is like one of the biggest things I think is important, is that if you can hire help, please do it for yourself. If you can hire someone to do your laundry or drop it off at one of like a fluff and fold, so that that's one less thing for you to have to manage to do in terms of all this. And if you can't afford it, can you exchange support with other, I did write moms, but I really should have written parents. Can you exchange with other parents? Like, can someone make a carpool with you, and sometimes they pick up your kids and sometimes you pick up their kids? Or can you do like a cooking exchange where everyone makes a couple really big dishes and then you guys all swap, so that you have stuff like in the freezer ready to go when you don't feel like cooking? Time now to start to try to think outside the box, and how can you get your needs met, and who can help you meet them? That's really the bottom line here. And in terms of coping with our feelings, what do we need to learn so we don't feel really overwhelmed? Maybe you're now going to be in a house by yourself, and it was your spouse who always like checked the water heater, cleaned out the air filters, or, did something, or they were the ones who always managed the finances, or they were the ones who took care of putting oil in the car. There are plenty of places you can go to learn those things, like look it up on YouTube or take a class, or talk with a financial advisor about your finances, or speak with an attorney about redoing your will. Like, there are a lot of people that you can turn to help you learn some of the things that you didn't have to take care of before on your own. And also like talking with other parents who've gone through this, like, well, how did you do whatever X, Y, and Z, or how did you learn to do this or that? So use the resources in your life and just know that you don't have to do everything by yourself. So also, and this is like specifically for parents, but redefining time with your kids. One of the most common things when you go from being a two-parent household to two single parents is that, very often either the custodial parent who has the kids like most of the time, let's say like Monday through Friday, and then the other parent maybe has them on the weekend, becomes the bad parent and the fun parent. So the bad parent is the one who makes them do their chores and has to do their homework and takes them for, immunization shots. And the fun parent is the one that has them on the weekend and takes them to Disneyland or takes them to the park. And so it really is hard and challenging to kind of not let yourself buy into that sort of stereotype of now which parent are you? So you were always a good parent and you will continue to be a good parent. And are you the one that sets limits? Maybe. And I think all parents need to set limits and all parents need to have boundaries and structure. But sometimes the guilt lets those things just kind of go by the wayside and like, oh, I'm putting my kids through a divorce, so here, let me give them more sweets so when they ask for it, because there's something else I can give them, or let me get them this extra toy, or be on screen time as much as they want. It's really important as a parent to maintain those boundaries and maintain that structure for your kids. All kids thrive with boundaries and structure, and it's really important not to let that fall apart because you're kind of struggling with who you are now as a parent, or your kids are like mad because you're the one who has to set the limits and you're the one who has to make them do their homework and go to bed on time, and when they're at their other parent's house they can do whatever they want. So it's a struggle, it really is, but it's one I want to say, like, hold on and really keep those boundaries and that structure for them. The other thing I think is really essential is finding one-on-one time with each of your children. So even if it's like 5 or 10 minutes in a day, and it's not when they're doing homework or when they're doing chores or things like that, and it's something that the child enjoys. So whether you can read them a chapter at bedtime, or whether you can sing a song with them that just the two of you sing together, or if it's making dinner, if you have a child that likes to cook, then great. Maybe during the week it's like Jack's turn to make dinner with you, and then it's Susie's turn to make dinner with you on a different night. But just carving out some one-on-one time with each of your children is super, super important. And then ultimately, you are still a family. Like, oftentimes kids going through a divorce feel like, my family has fallen apart. I don't have a family anymore because we're divorced and we come from a broken family, which is a horrible term I can't stand. But you are still a family and it looks different now. And you need to redefine what that family is for yourself and for your children. And we've spent a lot of time already talking about like some of the difficulties of going through a divorce and what you've lost, but you do still have really good things in your life. And it's important to focus on the things that you do still have. So who is in your life that has been there, that is going to be there, that is going to be your rock, is going to, help you through this? Do you still have your job or your career? Do you still have housing? Do you still have your health? Like, what are some of like the really basic things that you have, or maybe some of the other things that you're grateful for? One of the things I really recommend is journaling. So I recommend that to a lot of my clients for a lot of different reasons. But in addition to the journaling where you just kind of like, spill, oh, and I have a typo there. That's not how you spell people. Sorry, I will have to fix that. Sorry about that. So oftentimes journaling is just a place to let your feelings out. And I think that's a great coping tool for anyone, especially somebody going through a divorce. But this kind of journaling is about keeping a gratitude journal. And I really encourage people to pick 3 things a day that they're grateful for. And it could be the same 3 things over and over again if you can't think of something new, but every day focus on 3 things that you're grateful for, because even in the midst of chaos, you will find something that you're grateful for. And it's really important to not let all the negativity of what you're going through completely overshadow the good things that are still in your life. And I want to end on a hopeful note. Going through a divorce is horrible. There's kind of no way around it. Some is more horrible and some is less horrible, but it's pretty bad for anybody. But what do you want your future to look like? You also have this as an opportunity to create something new. What is going to be your new normal? That's what we talk about a lot with my trauma patients, is what's going to be the new normal after the trauma that you've gone through. And certainly a divorce can definitely be a trauma for people. But what do you want your life to look like? This is an opportunity for you to say, like, okay, that didn't work. What I have always wanted to do was learn to cook or learn to play the guitar, or I really have always wanted to work in this field. And this is a great time to be able to decide what you want your future to look like, and what steps do you need to take to create it. It's not enough just to say, like, oh, I want to do X, but you really have to break it down. What are the steps that you need to take in order to be able to do X? Because just saying you want X is just a dream. It's like a wish. But unless you have steps to help you achieve that, that's all it's ever going to be. So really, like, break it down into baby steps. Like, do you need to take a class? Do you need to meet with people in that field and really see what they think it's like? What needs to happen in order for you to create the future that you really want for yourself? So I think that is the end. So I am here for help and support. If anybody is looking for a therapist and would like to see me, I'm definitely open to talking and see if we would be a good fit. If not, I definitely have referrals I can give you if you're looking for a new therapist, or help you find a support group. So just know that help and support is definitely out there. So thank you, Karen,